reminding members and those not, as the case may be, in the public gallery.
They haven't been to the communion.
Populate that now.
Take the jacket off, it's a little warm.
One last night, wasn't it?
Sorry? Charger? Yeah.
Some crowds there, weren't
Yeah, that's good for charger. Oh yeah, that'll give we'll come to that in the thing. So should I give that over to Carol? Please, thank you.
you? Charge them.
I'm going to get a charger.
Do you need two chargers?
The
Do
charger.
you need a charger as well?
If I do, what charge now?
Mark's got it.
Catholics finished.
We've got two. We need two. Just to
No witnesses here.
Yes, please.
Sorry, if we can just ask the witnesses to wait. We have some
That's
other
my fault.
bits we
Sorry.
need to do first. Sorry.
Could remind members and those in the public gallery to switch off mobile phones as they may interfere with the sound recording system, and this meeting will be on camera. Brings us then to inquiry into issues around emergency exiting plans, including their impact on stadium capacity for the redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. Inquiry papers. Remind you also of an obligation, that's members and witnesses, to declare any relevant financial or other interests in relation to today's
Cahill wants to say.
business. Calvin, yes?
Yes, Chair. Members from this side of the room have declared interests up to this point.
Indeed.
3 of us being members of the GA, 1 an associate member, and indeed Rosie as an elected representative for the area in which we're concerned. You have also declared an interest in the last number of meetings in your role previously as Minister. And as Minister, I think that you should be a substantive witness to this inquiry. We talked earlier there about redacted and unredacted business cases, which you have been party to in the past. And I tabled a letter earlier there from yourself
Hard copy table.
to Mr Barry McElduff on the 15th of September.
We got a copy here to read this.
2010. Everybody has a copy there.
I did have a copy at some point.
Okay.
Yeah, that much paper around here. Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
That's
And
your
I think
side.
that this letter and the briefing to the committee, which it refers to and is included in it, proves without doubt that you were aware of the contents and drawing up of the OBC.
What particular verse or
in
sentences?
terms of the proposals put forward by the governing bodies of the GA.
Sorry, which paragraph is
Sorry,
this?
It's in the briefing paper.
I would just swear.
Well,
so know what
it's
you're referring
in
to.
paragraph 2 of the GA.
Paragraph 2, right,
GA redevelopment Casement Park with capacity all seated of circa 42,000. It then actually gives the overall
Sorry, could you just stop me for one on that paragraph 2? Paragraph 2 states that the proposals put forward by the governing bodies clearly indicated they saw the development of 3 separate stadiums as the most practical and effective way forward. Their preferred options in broad terms were that they wanted to redevelop Casement Park in that way. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. It also established then in paragraph 3
Sorry, let's just...
of the sorry.
Yes,
I've got a
that's
couple here that I want to raise because this is this was the embryonic STG, the establishment by DCAL of an oversight steering group comprising of senior representatives of the department, Sport NI, SIB, DSD, and Belfast City Council. There's also then a further remit further on in paragraph 7 regarding best practice in terms of health and safety at sporting venues, which was considered. Which was also considered, which obviously is relevant to this inquiry, as was the sports-specific clauses.
If we do a paragraph at a time.
Yeah, well, I'm only just one more
Okay,
and then
we'll go through them one at a time then.
best practice in terms of health and safety at sporting venues, which would obviously cover the terms of reference for this inquiry, and the sports-specific policies and strategies within which the sports operate, and then in paragraph 9 reference to the Gaelic Games aspect of development, redevelopment of Casement Park to a maximum spectator capacity of 40,000, which involved demolishing the existing stadium and building new on site. Chair, I believe that you are a substantive witness to this inquiry. I've said that before, and I believe that as such that you should come in front of the inquiry. And if you are to come in front of the inquiry, I believe that you should step aside as chair during the duration of this inquiry to allow an impartiality to be seen to be done right across the board. So that's basically what I'm asking that you do.
Well, let's
that you do exactly.
just go through the paragraphs one at a time. We've dealt with paragraph 2. Paragraph 2 was very clear, and it states specifically that the preferred option for the GA was a capacity of 42,000 at Casement Park with the redevelopment. So therefore, I don't think there's anything we've learned from that. I think we knew that already. This paragraph 3 says, ECAL established an oversight steering group. Do you know when that was established?
Well, Chair, that's the sort of question.
No,
we're
sorry,
asking you.
sorry, just do you know under which minister it was established?
Well, obviously, since this process took place during the mandate, you were the minister.
I was the minister for part of the mandate.
Yes.
The process actually started under a predecessor.
Yes, but this reference here is from the 30th of September.
Yes, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I'm simply saying that the establishment of an oversight steering group, and it may be helpful to get the information on that. We could go through this paragraph by paragraph, and I think you will find when you go through it that there is no substance to what you're saying. However, to short-circuit the thing, we are already seeking legal advice on this issue of conflicts of interest. That will be forthcoming, and just as it was helpful to get legal advice on another matter, we will be getting legal advice on this, and that will be put to the committee at one of the next meetings.
Chair, it's my belief that you know most of what we are seeking to establish here. I don't believe you are Manuel.
Chairman, can I just? I don't think it's fair that those of us on this side of the table who are from members of the same party should allow you to defend yourself on this issue. First of all, having read through the paragraphs that Mr O'Hoshin makes reference to, I see absolutely no meat on any bones in the allegations that you're making. For example, in paragraph 2, those are indications and the views of the sporting bodies as to what they seek and wanted to do. I don't see any point in what you've raised in paragraph 3 at all. In terms of paragraph 7, again it talks about the governing bodies' proposals. Of course, whenever sporting bodies are going to set out to have stadia, and I remember very clearly at that time, having been involved earlier as a Belfast City Councillor in opposing the National Stadium, as it was called, I campaigned for the 3 sports to have their own grounds, and I met with the 3 sports around that issue as a Belfast City Councillor. But if people on the other side of the room are going to ask for you to step aside as chair of this committee, I think they have to come up with more than this. I see nothing in this at all that suggests that your integrity and partiality in terms of chairing this committee are called into question. Nothing at all.
Chair, I'm not questioning your integrity.
You get a chance to respond. You get a chance to respond.
I have to say, as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to wait until the legal advice comes. And if the legal advice suggests something else, I have known you a long time and don't believe in any way that you would have agreed to chair the committee had you felt that this would in any way have led to your view as a chairman being jaundiced or lacking partiality. And so therefore, if there's no more than what has been said from across the table, frankly, I don't see anything in this document, the covering letter or the paper that's in front of us, that suggests that you should stand aside as chairman, and I think we should move on.
Just stress that I'm not asking you to stand aside as chairman. I'm asking you to stand aside as chair of this committee because you are a substantive witness to this inquiry.
Sorry, what's the difference there?
Well, the difference is that he is a substantive witness to the inquiry.
You just said stand aside as chairman.
As chair of the inquiry, yes.
There's a committee inquiry.
It's inquiry.
Dominic Brandon.
I'd be inclined to agree with Mr. O'Hoshin. You were part of this process as Minister. And I said last week that, I think it's rather bizarre that someone who was part of the process, whether it's a small part, a large part, or whatever, is chairing an inquiry into the process. I don't think that would be considered to be good practice, and that's not questioning your integrity in any way. The second point was from last week's meeting. I raised the issue of the sign of the outline business case. You said that you didn't think you signed off on it, and it may have been Edgar Jardine. We haven't yet got that information back. But as I said, for the very fact that you were involved in some way as Minister in this process, I think that should put you beyond your present role as Chair for the duration of the inquiry.
Well, first of all then, put on record again for the benefit of members that legal advice is being sought on this. The point was raised previously, it's been raised again, and that's why we're getting legal advice, and until we get the legal advice, I suspect things will remain as they are. Okay?
Chair, Mr.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Rosemary McCurdy.
Sorry, can I ask, Chair, if you signed off on funding? Can you remember? Did you sign off on funding for Stadia while you were Minister, or can you remember, was that decision passed to a civil servant?
No paperwork to hand, obviously. I'm trying to think back. What was agreed was that there would be a package of funding for the three sports, and that was agreed on the basis of the decision by the Northern Ireland executive decision. In fact, the point has been made by a number of people that this was an executive decision. It was a package for the three sports, and it was a few months prior to the end of that particular term of the Assembly, but precise dates and so on I couldn't recall. I'm sure in all of the information that we're about to get, the thousands of pages, we'll get answers to a lot of those questions.
But it would have been brought to the executive by yourself as the Minister for
I cannot recall the details of the process at that time, but I'm sure all of this will come in. However, we're not dealing with finance, we are dealing with the safety of spectators. We're dealing with the issue of emergency exiting. We're dealing with the issue of the provision of an adequate and appropriate emergency exiting plan that ensures the safety of spectators at Casement Park and ensures that no one's life is endangered. And that's the priority in this. And those were things that I never had any involvement with.
Yes, but what we've been involved in this inquiry has been getting into all sorts of detail as to who knew what when and who brought what to certain
around the issue of emergency exiting.
Yes, but what I'm just trying to establish, I believe it's the figure 4.4 million, and if you were happy to, I believe that's
what's 4.4 million?
I believe that's the amount of funding that was released by that you were recommending be released by Sport NI. But that's what we're trying to establish.
Is that in the document there?
I'm not sure. But it's what
sorry, well, you obviously have information some of the rest of us don't have. So, what
is that? It
was in the briefing last week. Apparently, that's fine. That's grand. Thank you.
But really, it's about the issues of spending money. If you hadn't concerns about safety at that point, it's a point I'm trying to make.
It's getting a bit pure.
Chairman.
We'll just leave it. We'll just leave it. Leave that point with Oliver McMullen and then William Humphrey. I'll come in at the end.
Just, Chairman, and the Chair, it may be useful for you to tell us what exactly you did know or were party to knowing when you were in the Chair. And as a professional, and as somebody who was put in that position, you must have recollections as to what went on. You know, you yourself, there was people up here before, and you questioned their ability of their memory. You know, we're certainly not questioning your memory of your ability, but if you can't remember what went on, then you must have a role to play. But Chairman is party to that. But if you're saying you don't know, and 4.4 million was signed off, to go to the executive. Are you telling us then you didn't know that was signed off?
Mr McMullen, I repeat for your information.
Certainly, I'll
Sorry,
listen to anything.
I'm just answering your question. Just to put on the record for a second time so that it registers. The issue
Oh, sorry,
before...
Chair, I take exception to that, the second time for it to be registered. What exactly are you implying there?
I'm applying nothing, Mr.
No,
Mr. McMullen. Just if you let me speak, please. I'm chairing the meeting.
Be careful what you say.
I am very careful of what I'm saying.
Yes, I'm listening to
Very careful indeed,
I'm
Mr.
listening.
McMullen. Now, this is an inquiry about a very serious matter.
Correct.
I do not appreciate the fact that some people try to divert into diversionary tactics, trying the folk who initially opposed the holding of an inquiry
Right.
didn't want to have one into an issue relating to the safety of spectators.
Sure.
In fact, sorry, I am
Very untrue. Very untrue.
sorry, I'm chairing the meeting, not you. I am chairing the meeting.
Well, stay on the subject.
I am chairing the meeting.
Don't mislead.
Yes.
I am chairing the meeting.
Misleading the meeting.
Well, stay on the subject.
Well, maybe it is that we will suspend the meeting.
Stay on the
You're
subject
misleading
then.
the meeting, not done.
Oh, misleading the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, vague recollection of a meeting in Bangor where some members opposed holding an inquiry, voted against it. Now, somebody, Mr. Bradley, I don't think was there that day, but others who are here did vote against it. But now, we'll move on to Mr. Humphrey.
Yeah, Chairman. Thanks. Having read through the document that obviously just been put forward this morning, the paragraph 1 states, given the current condition of the existing stadiums, it is vital that a cost-effective, sustainable and affordable way of assisting football, rugby and Gaelic games develop solutions to their stadium needs is found. Then in paragraph 2 it says the proposals put forward by the governing bodies. Now this paper go on to paragraph 7, which was read made reference to the consultants looked at the governing body's proposals. This paper is about the wish list of the 3 sporting bodies as to what they wanted for their stadia going forward. And if I was a member of any of those 3 sporting bodies, which I'm not, I would have done exactly the same thing. Because you asked for the optimum in terms of the issue. There had been a long, protracted argument as to whether there should be a national stadium or the 3 stadia upgrades, and it was resolved by the executive, and funding agreed to fund 3 stadiums. Now, so this document is about is a visionary document, setting out clearly what to, in reply to Mr. McElduff, and there's nothing in the letter at all, by the way, which was also made reference to, which suggests in any way a lack of partiality. This document is a wish list about regional stadia. It in no way can be connected to or has a relation to an inquiry. Can I read out what this inquiry is about? An inquiry into issues around emergency exiting plans, including their impact on stadium capacity for the redevelopment of Casement Park Stadium. This document has absolutely nothing to do with this inquiry. Bears no relation to it. And I say again, we should move on. Wait on the legal advice and move on. We have work to do today. Let's get on with it.
Chair, substantial public funds have been put forward for the design and delivery of business case and the stadia. I think it's our duty, and you are a central player in that, and my proposal stands.
Your proposal is?
That you stand aside for the duration
I'll
of
second
this.
Okay, we'll need to get just Oliver McMullen first, yeah.
Yes, Chairman, I'm just going to go over what Mr. Hodgson said. What the letter says is one thing, but the fact is that the wish list that we talk about, the fact is that there was 4.4 million signed off to go forward for design, and by the comments made by quite a few people in here, that design included emergency, etc. And that bears very heavily in what a lot of people were questioning the witnesses on. So if the 4.4 million was released for design, were you aware of that when you were in the chair in 2009? That's a central question. Were you in the chair in 2009 when the 4.4 was signed off?
I am here today not as a witness to this committee. Sorry, if you would allow me at least the courtesy, Mr. O'Hushy.
Yeah, you should be.
I know some people may want to divert away onto other things. We have a proposal, two proposals. One is that we proceed with our business today and with our agenda, because some of us are prepared to sit here to 6 or 7 o'clock to do the work, if that's what it requires, if so much time is wasted. Now, wasting time is not good in anybody's terms.
I don't think
So, sorry, just a minute. Mr. McMullen, you may not be able to control yourself, but please, I'm chairing the meeting, I speak.
Well, Chair,
Sorry, I will speak, and when I've finished, I will call on you.
that's very kind
I
of
will,
you.
that's normally what a chair does. I'm glad you can understand that. Now, it's been proposed there by Mr.
Can I
Humphrey.
say something?
Sorry,
Just
if you just bear a minute, Gordon. We have a lot of important business before us today. We brought in Carl Southern from across the water from England to give evidence. We have officials here from Belfast City Council. I think out of courtesy and respect to those whom we've invited here today as witnesses, we should at least make sure that we get ahead with the business and are not diverted by what is directly relevant matter. You have a proposal before us, Mr. Humphrey. Well, okay, Mr. Bradley, and then we'll take the
No,
proposal.
Chair, not hold you up, just want to second the proposal made by
Okay,
Mr.
right.
Could I ask for some clarity from the clerk, please?
Chair, as I'd indicated before, through the Chair, we are seeking legal advice on this. If members have proposals, this is a fairly exceptional circumstance, and the legal advice is forthcoming, but I don't have it now, and I need other documents to get that legal advice. That's where that is at the minute on this issue of a potential conflict of interest.
Could I ask clerk when the legal advice might be available?
I need the documents first, and then the legal advice will be turned around as quickly as possible.
Well, can I say that I'm reluctant to deal with this matter now, given that it's just been tabled, so I haven't had a chance to consider it. But I do think that in exchanges across the table, that people are entitled to make their proposals and to put them without them being interrupted. And what I would like to say is I think this matter should not be discussed in open session, that we should put it on the agenda for next week in closed session. Hopefully we'll have had legal opinion by then, and we can have a discussion about it in the proper way at that time. And I just hope that people would agree that that would be a way forward.
There's an alternative proposal there put forward by Mr. McRae. Mr. McMullen?
Yes, Chairman, Mr. McRae, what he's after saying, we discussed this in closed session. We're discussing a possible witness, and we've already discussed witnesses in open session. So to go into a closed session to discuss whether or not this document is relevant.
Witnesses were discussed in closed session.
It was suggested in closed session. I'm saying it should be kept in public session. And you are a possible witness, and I would say you are a witness to this inquiry, and therefore you should be on the list as a witness. And therefore,
Well, that's why we're getting legal advice.
I don't think you need
Chair,
legal advice on that.
Just a point of clarity, what is the legal advice on? Is it on?
First of all,
Chair, the legal advice will be on whether or not there's an identifiable conflict of interest for the chairperson having been Minister of DCAL at the time of the outlined business case. So we've requested information from the department and also from Sport and I around procedures around the signing off of that business case, and also the unredacted business case itself, and legal will look at those.
okay. We'll have that information hopefully for next week, we think.
I'm not sure, Chair. I don't want to make promises I can't necessarily keep, but we will move that on as quickly as we possibly can.
Sorry, just Gordon, and then
all I would
William.
say is I think I'm most disappointed of what has went on here today. I think on every occasion, without exception, the parties across the table have circled the wagons, in fact the green wagons, on every opportunity to try and frustrate this inquiry and to do all they can to stop it. And I must say I'm most disappointed. This inquiry is about finding the facts, establishing the facts. Once they're established, then to come to conclusions and move it forward. All I can say is I really do wonder why that is the case. Is there something to hide? We'll leave the public to make that judgment. The public are watching and listening, and they wonder why the green wagons are circled so tightly.
Okay.
On every meeting, protect something. What are they protecting? That's the question that needs answered.
Sorry, just a moment. He's spoken now. Was it?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Humphrey.
Chair, in relation to Mr. McRae's proposal, actually, it's not that distant from my own, in the point that I did say that wait until the legal advice comes through. You know, as a party, as an individual, I want to see very clearly stadia that are built that are safe, and the whole issue around this is about the design. But a number of members have failed when they're raising design as an issue over the last number of weeks to actually tie in design, not exiting, but emergency exiting. This issue is about emergency exiting, not exiting of stadia. And so design is absolutely crucial in the whole scenario. And if I thought for a moment you being chairman would in any way impede this committee from doing its work and reaching the conclusion of that work in an open and transparent way, I would have no difficulty in your removal as chairman. But this is the final committee that is scheduled. We will now have another meeting next week with Mr. Scott hopefully in front of us. Everyone agreed that. I thought that was agreed unanimously earlier. If we have that legal advice by next week, that's good. If we don't, we will certainly, I would imagine, have it, given the constraints that Peter's operating under, because he has to get other documentation to get the legal advice. We should be in a position to have that for September. Now, I have no difficulty, therefore, if Mr. McRae is in agreement with coupling what he has said to mine, because I do think they're pretty close in that context. But again, I make the point. I think this is somewhat of a red herring. It is a desperate attempt to try and sideline this committee from its work, because this document is simply not related or connected to the inquiry which we've been about for the last number of weeks.
Okay. There was a proposal there about a particular line of action. There was a counter, if I can say, not a counter proposal, but another different proposal to defer the matter until we get the legal advice. That was from Mr. McRae. I think it's the case there. Mr. Humphrey seemed to be seconding that. Our members, I'm just put to the meeting, ask the question.
Chair, further.
I'm just asking for information here. Would people be amenable to the proposal from Mr. McRae?
Sir, can I put it further to the meeting, because it would be Charlie's not to actually bring it forward. I do believe you are a substantive witness who has information that will be useful to this inquiry. I believe that you have some knowledge of the release of substantial public funds in drawing up the outline business cases, and also in that money that went forward towards design. However, and if we are being guaranteed that we will have legal advice, ideally for this day week, my proposal stands, but I defer it until such time as we get legal advice. Right. But my proposal stands.
That is a reasonable way forward. He is absolutely entitled to put his case forward. Let's try and get the legal opinion as soon as we can, and we'll deal with it then. And that, I think we have agreement around the table. William, if you don't mind, I think we have agreement on that, and we should do that.
I'll try and construct my own sentences.
Well, I'll just make point.
Sorry, just
my vote at some stage. So yeah. I'm only trying to.
Sorry.
Well, your vote may or may not depend on what I'm going to say. So let me at least have the courtesy to say it. The point I was going to simply make was, to be fair to Peter as clerk, I think in what Mr. O'Hoshin said, which I have little difficulty with, Peter, I don't think, can give us the guarantee.
No, he said ideally by next.
Yeah, ideally, yes.
Of the leak. So the point that I simply was making in my supporting Mr. McRae was, if we don't have that for next week, we're putting undue pressure on the clerk, and therefore, hopefully we'll be. If we don't have it for next week, we may have it for September. Or over the summer.
I would be amazed if we didn't. Yes. Okay. It's been agreed then, I think, that the matter will be deferred until we get legal advice. Are members agreeable to that? Okay. Matter's been deferred.
Ms McCorley wants to speak.
I indicated a while back.
Sorry.
Yes.
No,
go
no,
ahead.
I did.
Mr. Murray, yes.
Okay, I just want to clarify some points. I mean, Mr Dunn made some remarks which I wish to reject, and to give the context for this inquiry, we rejected it on the basis that it was unnecessary because there are 2 other inquiries ongoing. Nevertheless, the vote was taken and that's how it worked out. I reject Mr Dunn's remarks as scurrilous, that we are not genuine about our involvement in this inquiry, and if he has got evidence, and the Hansard will show it, that we are not well-intentioned and going about it in an appropriate way, then he needs to reduce it. But I have been on record here as stating that safety is paramount. I have said that on several occasions, and I stand over that, and I do take offence at those remarks.
And you put that on the record. Thank you. Moves us on then to...
Just wanted to clarify that Mr. Bradley and Mr. McMullen want to speak as well.
Okay.
Chair, I just wanted to express my rejection of what Mr Dunn has said. I have participated fully in this inquiry and I have questioned witnesses, regardless of their background, as robustly as I can. And once again, that is on the Hansard, and that will show that what Mr Dunn has said here today is unfounded and untrue.
And you put that on the record. Mr. McMullen?
Yes, and just again, as what Mr Dunn has said, circling the green wagon, you know, those sort of remarks are not helpful in this inquiry, and there's nothing to hide. But this minister here has ordered an inquiry into the whole thing, which is an independent inquiry, so there will be nothing hid, and there can be nothing hid. And so remarks like that there do say more for the person that said them than anything else. Thank you.
I'm going to pull the matter to an end there. People have put their views on the record. They will appear in the Hansard of the meeting.
Chair,
I don't want to...
Just to be clear, Hansard don't start until the briefing starts, but it is on
It's
video
on the
record. It's on video record.
Sorry, it's on the
video record.
It's probably just as well, some of the things that have been said, and some of the things that were done or not. Right, moves us on then to the next item, and again, I must apologise to our 2 witnesses from Belfast City Council.
We have,
What?
we have more things before the...
Oh, sorry, I apologise.
Sorry.
Sorry, I apologise.
So, Chair, just before we move on, we have a proposal that appears to be accepted by all.
Yes.
That we wait for the legal advice and then discuss the issue.
Thank you. Moves us on then to just declarations of interest.
By a member of the GAA.
Likewise, Chair. Likewise.
And as has been discussed at some length, I was Minister in the department when during part of the process, not at the start of it, but during part of it.
Could I just ask the clerk, do we have to make a declaration of interest every single meeting? Is it not on the record members' interests and it's clear for this inquiry?
Chair,
do we not just accept?
We did indicate that at the start, but members do want to make declarations of interest as we go along, and it's for clarity as much as anything else. But if members are content, those can be carried forward as they are and registered on the minutes.
I just think it is acknowledged that members have declared their interests, and I...
Are members agreeable to that?
Are members agreeable to the rolling forward of those interests on a weekly basis? Okay.
Now, referring members to the SharePoint feature on their tablet devices, allowing members to access papers in relation to this inquiry. All documents relating to the inquiry, including the Hansards and an index pertaining to these documents, will be added by the committee office team throughout the summer recess. Members can access these papers by opening their committee documents folder and click on a folder on the left-hand side of the screen named Casement Park Inquiry. A step-by-step guide has been provided by members for members' ease of reference. What you do need glasses to be done.
A bit small.
If members require assistance accessing this folder, I'm sure some will, please inform the committee office team who will be happy to help. I also refer members to the following correspondence found in their pack which was received this week in connection with the inquiry. First of all, page 5, we have the decal has provided a number of documents requested by the committee in relation to the inquiry. The covering letter providing further information on the STG draft terms of reference, Sport NI staff moves, the tennis report, a timeline of engagement between DCAL and the STG, and information on the approval of designs has been included in members' packs. However, the attached documents have been uploaded to the electronic folder on their tablets, as the documents were too large to include in packs. Members should note that these documents have been provided to the committee in full and in confidence. On page 14, we have correspondence from the Minister, which has the former Permanent Secretary, Mr Peter May's affidavit to the planning approval, the judicial review attached. Page 24, correspondence provided by Mora regarding their meetings with Sport NI, specifically that referred to at the committee's meeting last Thursday. Page 3 in table papers. Members will find a follow-up research paper by Ms Susie Cave on planning application and emergency exit plan. Page 20 in the table papers, members will find the drawings that Mike Trice from Populous used at last Thursday's meeting. All these papers will be uploaded to the electronic drive, so members have the opportunity to view these documents over the summer recess. Could I seek your agreement to include these papers in the inquiry folder? And also
Have we agreement?
agreement.
Yeah.
Sorry. Referring members to the additional information provided by Mr Scott following his attendance in front of the committee on the 30th of April, and that's at page 8 in tabled papers. This information will also be uploaded to the SharePoint. And I can also remind members that the original information provided by Mr Scott has not been formally included as evidence to the inquiry, as his attendance was before the inquiry officially began. Could I seek your agreement, therefore, to include his original bundle and the additional information provided today to the inquiry folder? Members agree?
Members agree.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is the correct point in the proceedings. Just to ask, there was one line in the affidavit from Peter May which I found difficult to understand, and it was in paragraph 11, page 114, or page 19.
Page 19
of your papers.
Of the pack, or the, yes.
It says, and it's just to get some clarity around it, in addition, any delay to the casement project commencing.
The original pack.
Dominic?
Electronic pack, page 19.
And which point?
It's number 11.
Number 11.
11.
Yeah. It was just for clarity, because it has implications in terms of any delays over emergency exiting issues. In relation to any delay to the casement project commencing after August 14 may give rise to a compensation event which will result in an increase in the overall project cost. Just to clarify, could we ask for clarity what they mean by a compensation event? Compensate who for what? That was all to ask. Members were agreeable to be just right and ask for clarity around that.
Have agreement for that? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies. We have two apologies today, David Hilditch and Karen McKevitt. There are no other apologies, obviously. Draft minutes of the meeting on the 25th of June. The draft minutes of the meeting of the 25th of June are at page 34. And could I seek members' agreement that these minutes are an accurate record of the meeting? Great.
Great, yeah.
Brings us then, at length, at last, to the inquiry into issues around emergency exiting plans, including their impact on stadium capacity for the redevelopment Casement Park Stadium, and the briefing from Belfast City Council. Could I refer members to the Clerk's memo at page 40 and the Belfast City Council briefing paper at page 43, and welcome the officials to the meeting. We're going to have Ms Mary Brown, who's the Environmental Health Manager, and Mr John Walsh, who's the Town Solicitor. I don't know, I suppose there aren't any relevant financial or other interests to declare on your part, no? No. In relation to today's business, and then inviting yourselves to make an opening statement. Thank you.
Chairman, I propose to allow Ms Brown to outline the Council's position. Valerie Brown is the Environmental Health Manager who has health and safety within her portfolio of responsibility, and she would be in charge of those officers who deal with issues in respect of the safety of sports grounds, Northern Ireland Order 2006. I'm here to assist the inquiry and Ms Brown as is required.
Okay, Mr.
Please,
Chairman.
Thank you very much for inviting us this morning to brief committee. We are actually the certifying authority. The Council is the certifying authority under the provisions of the Safety of Sports Grounds Order, and we have 8 designated grounds in Belfast. We issue safety certificates. We issued safety certificates for the 8 grounds in September 2010, and at that time the certificates were issued for an indefinite period of time. They would be reviewed annually, and we would look at any changes which occur at the grounds in relation to the physical condition of the grounds or in relation to the safety management at the grounds. Initially we issued a certificate for Casement Park back in September 2010 for, when it was initially 5,000, but then that was just because barrier testing hadn't been carried out, but then it was for 31,661 spectators, and that was regarded as the safe capacity at the ground. Now, the 3 main factors that are used in determining the safe capacity are the entrancing capacity, the exiting capacity, and that includes emergency exiting, and the holding capacity of the ground, and it would be the lower of these figures that would be determined as the safe capacity for the ground. Okay, in relation to, that's a very simplistic approach to it. There's obviously a P factor which is taken into consideration, which is in relation to the physical condition of the ground, and then the S factor which relates to the safety management, and that would be applied as well. And there's lots of different issues that are taken into consideration under the guidance which was issued for the safety of sports grounds, and which is referred to as the Red Guide. And certainly initially that is the guidance that we were using in the first instance. Now, that was based on the GB Guide to Safety of Sports Grounds, and it has since been reviewed and updated, and we have a 5th edition of the GB Guide, and I know that the redevelopment has been based mainly around the 5th edition of the guide. So just then, in terms of the emergency exiting, if I just maybe mention in terms of the Council's role, we're engaged. Well, I'll maybe just talk about the process actually first, might be easier. In terms of the Safety Technical Group process, we were first notified of that process in October 2012. By the then Permanent Secretary, Rosie Flanagan, and that was a letter to my colleague Mark McGovern, and it basically it was in relation primarily to Windsor Park at the time, the letter, but it referred to the Casement Park project, that it had been mobilised and that the design team appointed, and it intimated that the design team had provided the Safety Technical Group with an initial overview of the proposed option for Casement Park, and that with a more detailed submission to be available at the end of November 2012. Now, in terms of the Safety Technical Group process, this was outlined to us in the letter that Sport NI, as the overseeing body, would be responsible for recording all agreements, queries and actions required to ensure that the Safety Technical Group was in a position to confirm that all reasonably foreseeable safety scenarios had been considered and anticipated within the design to achieve full spectator capacity within the safety certification process. Now, the first meeting for the Safety Technical Group for Casement Park was convened by the chair of the group, Paul Scott, in February 2013. And at that meeting, Mr Scott basically outlined the role of the Safety Technical Group, and it met again in April, May and September of that year to consider aspects of the design of the stadium brought to it on behalf of the design team by Mr Scott. Now, over the course of those meetings, a number of queries and concerns were raised regarding the design, in particular the egress time and narrowing in the concourses uncovered seating, location of concessions, and emergency evacuation were the sort of the main points that were discussed. Now, and it was quite an unusual design. There were various issues at a meeting, and I've listed our basic engagement at the end of the report in terms of chronologically, but there was a particular meeting which was convened by DCAL in October 2013 between the STG and the design team. Now that sat slightly outside. It wasn't an STG, it was a meeting. It wasn't, we didn't receive a minute of that meeting. And Mr Carl Southern and
would you mind just clarifying which date in October 2013 is that meeting you're referring to?
16th?
Yeah,
16th of October.
Yeah, 16th of October. Now, that meeting, as I say, there was various people at that meeting, and it was chaired by Mr Carl Southern from DCAL, and the issue to do with emergency exiting was raised based on a scenario of the Anderson Town Road exits being unavailable for use, and because of an incident outside the ground. And it was agreed at that time that crowd modelling would be commissioned to establish some additional exiting data around that. I should say that there already had been crowd modelling carried out for the exiting under normal conditions, and this was to show how a crowd of 38,000 spectators could exit the ground in accordance with the standards set out in the guide, and that was put to us. The modelling was shown, and it was agreed that that was possible. So then when we were looking at the emergency exiting, because of a number of complexities around the emergency exiting, we would always look at exiting and emergency exiting together when we're looking at through the certification process and in accordance with the guide, and normally one would follow on from the other, but on this occasion what had happened, we had a representative on the STG from PSNI who raised an issue with regard to the fact that it was a reasonably foreseeable scenario that the Anderson's Town Road, potentially the exiting would be unavailable for use because of potentially a cordon or a security alert, and it being cordoned off. And that the Owenvara and the Moorland exits would be used. So because of the complexity around the design and the nature of the design, the fact that it was really, we had asked for the crowd modelling just to see how the concourse, the main concourse, which formed sort of part of the exiting system, the general exiting system, how that would operate if the 72% that was shown in the modelling that would normally exit via the Anderson's Town Road, to show how they would use that exiting system, and then also if there were any particular issues around that, and then to develop some sort of an emergency exiting strategy based on that additional information to see, because I mean obviously when you're looking at exiting you'd be looking at the exit widths, you'd be looking at if there is the exit system going to be free flowing at all points? Is there any narrowing? Is it going to cause potential issues? And obviously then the rate of passage and how that would be maintained throughout the exiting process. And all of those things were looked at. We felt that just with the complexity of the design, the fact that there is no outer circulation area in the design of the ground, and the fact that the majority of the exiting is to the front of the stadium, that we needed this additional information to look at how emergency exiting could be achieved, and for a crowd of 38,000. So that was basically, we were sort of, at that meeting, we were assured that modelling would be commissioned, and that it would be taken forward, and that we would be advised early in January. I think we were told that we would get some information back on that. but to date we haven't received any further crowd modelling or information with regard to the emergency exiting. I have to say that some of the other issues that I referred to throughout the process, those issues were addressed as we went along in relation to, narrowing of the concourse and moving concessions to, ensure that didn't happen. And there was suggestions put forward with regard to the uncovered seating to try and mitigate against any sort of persistent standing or any of that thing because of the rain, if it's raining and the seating's uncovered, or for spectators migrating into covered areas. So, but there was suggestions put forward that could address those issues. I think it all boiled down to just getting the additional information with regard to the emergency exiting.
Okay, thank you. I have a number of people with their names down here for questions, so I'll start with Oliver McMullen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Valerie. Can I ask you, whenever Paul Scott gave his presentation here, was he speaking on behalf of the Belfast City Council reps and the STG when he made the comment referring to a Hillsborough-type disaster?
Well, I can't say that. I mean, all the minutes from the STG meetings, I think you have those minutes and have seen them. I mean, that wasn't discussed at the STG as far as I'm aware.
Well, bearing in mind the safety certificates and the licensing system for sports ground, do you think there could be a Hillsborough-type scenario, as Mr. Scott described?
In terms of our role on the STG as a council, we were asked to sit on the safety technical group in an advisory role, given our experience and given that we would ultimately regulate the ground in terms of issuing a safety certificate. Now, the way that was put to us was really that we would look at all the scenarios that were presented to us in terms of design, and that we would comment on that in accordance with the guidance. So we wouldn't have discussed it from that point of view. We didn't feel, I think as a council, and looking at the guide, we didn't feel that we could make, we felt that we needed to get further information with regard to the emergency exiting because of, as I said, because of the complexity of the design of the exiting systems, and we requested that, I would hope in a measured way, in that we just felt that we needed that information to look to see how emergency evacuation could be achieved at the ground and in a positive way.
Well, can I go back to that again? Do you think the Hillsborough comment was appropriate?
I really don't feel that I'm in a position to discuss that or to comment on that.
Did you discuss it at all?
I didn't hear the comment, so I wouldn't have...
Have you read the comment?
I haven't.
I think the witness has been fairly clear.
No, that's no, and I just wanted to clear that up, whether heard it or read it. And you've neither heard it nor read it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I make 2 points at this point? Mr. Scott is not an employee of Belfast City Council. So any view that he expressed to this committee or otherwise was not being expressed on behalf of the organisation that we represent. And secondly, in relation to the other point that's been made, could I say that there is obviously regulatory powers contained within the safety of sports grounds, which obviously you don't want to have to use, but it's unlikely that a Hillsborough scenario would arise when or if there were issues identified, because it's likely that measures would have been put in place to limit the numbers of people who attended in the event that there was an identified risk.
Can I just ask Mr. Walsh, would you be happy for those comments to remain on the record? Hillsborough-type comments.
It's not for me to speak for the mind of Mr. Scott or others. Simply saying that he's not associated with the organisation that we represent.
But you were on the STG, were you not?
No, I wasn't. No, I don't.
Okay.
Neither of them were on the STG.
Everybody don't work for Belfast City Council, just
Can I just ask then, the safety certificate that was issued by Belfast City Council in 2010 was for safe exiting capacity of 31,661. This capacity would obviously be based on the assumption that that number could safely evacuate the ground in emergency. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, after design of a new state-of-the-art stadium by a world-class design team, where the exit widths were increased by some, I think, 50%, the XTG are stating that the emergency capacity is now 18,000. Would you explain this on behalf of it?
Yes, of course. The design that has been put forward for the new stadium is very different from the existing stadium, and when the safe capacity was determined in 2010 for the existing stadium, we would have been looking at a complete, as I say, different standards for a start, because it was existing construction, it wasn't new construction, it wasn't, and so it was an existing ground. And there were a number of issues associated with that. So, number one, there would have been a fairly wide and outer circulation area, which could have been used as a place of reasonable safety. You could have taken the evacuation onto the pitch into consideration in your emergency exiting calculations as well. And also there were, just as I say, differences in terms of how the ground would have been used, and the rates of passage would have been different. So that at that time, that's what that was calculated at. Looking at the guide and the new design, you cannot take the pitch into consideration. According to the guide, you cannot take the pitch into consideration. You can use it, but you cannot take it into consideration in your calculations for emergency exiting. And also, there's no outer circulation area in the new design, and there are limited or no other additional places of reasonable safety other than the exiting systems.
Is that the view, your view, the STG's view?
That is looking at the guidance. That is the STG's view.
And would you say Mr. Scott was wrong then?
In what way?
On his comments on the evacuation?
But that is supporting those comments, is it not?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Could I just ask a question there? Who's responsible for producing the emergency exiting plan for a stadium? Is it the owner or someone said to us the other last week that what we refer to, I suppose, as blue light services had some responsibility about this?
No, it is actually the safety certificate is issued on the qualified person, and the qualified person for for Casement Park for the previous certificate would be Danny Murphy, the Ulster Secretary, and he would be responsible for ensuring that the terms and conditions of the safety certificate were met. Now, in terms of the new design, it would be the people who have designed the stadium should be designing a stadium to Green Guide standard. In this case, because we're looking at the 5th edition of the GB Guide, and they would be responsible for ensuring that all the standards within the guide were met within the new stadium development. We would look at the stadium purely from a regulatory point of view and look at it outside the STG point of view. If we were looking at issuing a safety certificate under our legal obligations, we would be looking at it from the point of view of the fact that we would be looking at what is presented to us, and we would be basing that then in terms of if they have emergency evacuation, or if they have, their egress time, their emergency egress time, their entrance capacity, their exiting capacity. So all of those things would be looked at, and then we would base the safe capacity on that. The other thing, just in relation to, you said about the confusion around the blue light responsibility. what is actually, there is also an obligation in the standard to have a contingency plan should there be a major emergency that impacts on a ground, and that contingency plan should contain within it arrangements for handover from the safety officer in charge of the ground to, normally it would be a senior PSNI officer, with regard to if there's a major emergency. And the type of emergencies would be, for example, if there was, say, serious public disorder at the ground, or if there was a gas explosion, or if there was perhaps structural collapse, something of that nature where there's a risk to life and a major incident occurs. And so you would have a contingency plan, and you would have a plan whereby at a certain point you would have arrangements whereby you hand over, where it's appropriate to do so, responsibility for the management of that incident to, normally, as I say, it would be PSNI. But that's not the same as looking at having their emergency exiting capacity. That would need to be determined in advance.
And the responsibility for drawing that up lies with the designers, the architects and owners of the stadium.
Very much so, yes.
Thank you. Rosie McCorley.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Thanks for the presentation. Valerie, you mentioned something, I was just maybe wondering if you could explain it a wee bit. You said that the pitch can be used for emergency accident, but it can't be considered when you're looking at creating a plan.
Perhaps I didn't say that correctly. It can be used in terms of for the existing stadium and for existing grounds and design. You can use it in your calculation for emergency exiting. You can take it into consideration as people being moved onto the pitch as a place of safety, reasonable safety. But you do also have to be able to. There are caveats around that in terms of being able to get people, off the pitch again, and into another exiting system. But certainly in new design, it's not really an ideal situation, and therefore in new design it wouldn't be considered. The guide clearly states that it shouldn't be considered in determining your emergency exiting capacity from the ground.
So are you saying that it can't be considered?
Not for new design.
Can't be considered,
It
because
can't be considered.
that runs contrary to the evidence we had last week, and it was from Populous, and Mike Trice listed a whole array of stadia that he's been involved in development, so he does seem to have a lot of experience, and he did say that the design was safe. So we were trying to get through a lot of evidence to actually establish what is safe and what isn't. But he was quite clear on that, and that the pitch may be used as a place of relative safety.
Not in new design. The Green Guide's very clear about that it cannot be used as a place of reasonable safety.
Okay, so I mean this is a clear dispute then. So would you then be saying that Mike Trice at Populous that they are wrong?
I can show you, yeah.
The witness permitted a moment just to find the relative
That's very
provision.
helpful indeed.
Okay, under the provision of our section 10.9, emergency evacuation time in the guide, it clearly states, for new construction, while in practice spectators may evacuate onto the pitch or areas of activity in an emergency, this should not form part of the calculation of the emergency evacuation time for newly constructed grounds or sections of grounds.
Okay, so I mean there's a conflict then between the different pieces of interpretations of
I think that's
that.
very clear.
Yeah, I think what the important thing here is we've actually now been given the reference, the page reference and the paragraph reference in the Green Guide, and that's the one that Mr Trice would have been using when he was designing grounds in GB, so I'm sure he's familiar with it. So it's good to have that, and then we'll be able to get members circulated with a copy of that, but we appreciate Ms Brown clarifying that for us. Thank you.
Just for reference, it's in page 5 of Paul Scott's papers. We've had this, and we've talked about it repeatedly.
Thank you.
Okay. And can I also say, ask you just about, in relation again to the emergency exit and a potential closure of Fentonstown Road, and you know, a potential specific scenario. And you're aware, of course, that plan drawings were complete at that stage, and plan approval had been sought in June 13, and public money had already been spent on the stadium. So, could you maybe tell me maybe why you think the STG waited till October 13 after public money had already been spent? You know, would that have been appropriate?
Well, my experience, and as I say, we were the first STG meeting for Casement Park was convened on the 11th of February 2013, and that's when the issues around exiting, etc., were first raised. Now, having said that, Mr. Scott, as the chair of the STG, convened that meeting. He outlined, you know, he provided drawings and outlined, really give an overview of the redevelopment. And as I say, at that stage, you know, concerns were raised by the group, and that was set out in an initial review report sent to DCAL on the 20th of February, and they included the potential for uncovered seating in areas of the ground to lead to persistent standing.
Which year?
Sorry, this was the 11th of February 2013. This was the first meeting of the STG.
Okay, right, thank you.
And as I say, it was 20th of February that initial review document was sent. Included the potential for uncovered seating in areas of the ground to lead to persistent standing. The lack of access to the pitch for potential emergency vehicles was discussed. The proposed exiting arrangements, particularly the potential for congestion, were discussed at that. And the STG was advised by Mr. Scott that the architects were developing a flow model that would assist in looking at exiting arrangements. And as I said in my initial statement, normally the emergency exiting follows on from the exiting arrangements. So initially we were querying the exiting arrangements, and then we wanted to get further information on those so that we could then start to look at the emergency exiting. And as would be normal practice, we at the subsequent meetings on the 12th of April, at the second meeting of the STG, this meeting was attended by Carl Southern from DCAL and Tim Harkin from GAA. Both exiting and emergency exiting were again discussed, but the information relating to modelling and dimension drawings were not available to the STG at that meeting. So it was really difficult to take the discussions further at that time, but certainly the issues were raised, and we were waiting on that crowd modelling to look at the exiting arrangements. And then on the 30th of April, we met with STG representatives, or we were actually invited to the latter part of a meeting, which was looking, and that was where the modelling was presented to us for exiting. And then as we progressed through various meetings, the 31st of May, again, that meeting of the STG, that was the third meeting, that was attended by Mott MacDonald, DCAL and Populous and the GAA, and the main discussion was around questioning the representatives from Mott MacDonald on the crowd modelling and the exiting arrangements. So again, that was discussed, and we again expressed concerns, the council expressed concerns about issues to do with the narrowing of the main concourse and other issues, and again issues to do with emergency exiting. So throughout the process, again then on the 30th of July, following a meeting between BCC representative Jerry Donnelly and the chair of the STG and Laura Strong from Sport NI, Mr Donnelly sent an email to Mr Scott and Ms Strong confirming his concerns about emergency evacuation arrangements and the continuing lack of information regarding this and other issues that was coming back. to the STG, and in particular he mentioned again the narrowing of the concourses and the fact that an emergency evacuation plan had not been presented to the STG. And then on the 5th of September, the 4th meeting of the STG, draft report to DCAL was circulated for comment, and the issues of the narrowing of the main concourse and the location of the concessions and the need for unimpeded flow when exiting along the concourse were again discussed, and the issue of restricting traffic flow at that stage was discussed as well by, I think that was by PSNI. And then following the draft report, on the 16th of September, the draft report was sent to members of the STG. On the 12th of September, Jerry Donnelly from the Council sent an email to Paul Scott requesting adjustment to the report, again to make sure that those concerns around emergency exiting capacity were reflected in that report that was going to DCAL. And then, so that was in September. Then on the 1st of October, following several telephone conversations between the Council and Paul Scott, Mr Scott sent Mr Donnelly an email correspondence between him and Carl Southern regarding the draft report which he had sent to Mr Southern on the 19th of September, and Mr Donnelly responded to Mr Scott by email on the 1st of October 2013 regarding suggested wording for the report in relation to the narrowing of the concourses and the exiting, and arranged to meet with Mr Scott later that day. So again on the 15th of October we sent an email to Mr Scott following a meeting with him earlier that day, and the email again Mr Donnelly raised the issue of emergency exiting and suggested that the STG should advise DCAL to request the crowd modelling, which again, we hadn't received any information, to that which was completed for the normal exiting. And the 16th of October, then that was that meeting that was convened by DCAL to discuss that, and that's when we were given the assurance that that crowd modelling would be commissioned.
Okay, can I just, sorry, just bear with me, which guide, the red guide, is the one that was determining the exiting, using the pitch. Is it the red guide then? Is that the latest one that you were talking about that says you can't use the pitch?
The red guide is
Which
based.
edition would that be?
The red guide, there's only ever been one guide to safety of sports grounds produced in Northern Ireland, and that's referred to as the red guide, and that was based on the 4th edition of the GB Guide to Safety at Sports Grounds, which is referred to as the Green Guide. And then subsequent to that, it was that guide in GB was reviewed, and there's a 5th edition of it, and it was agreed that it was agreed that the red guide, the Guide to Safety of Sports Grounds in Northern Ireland needed to be reviewed, and that looking at the regional stadium programme, that it would be the standards set out in the Green Guide, or if those standards were higher in the Red Guide, in the 5th edition or the latest edition of the Green Guide, if they were higher in the Northern Ireland Guide, they would be used, but it would be primarily the standards set out in the 5th edition of the GB Guide to Safety at Sports Grounds that would be used.
Right, so in terms of how the 4th and the 5th guide of the red, or 4th, 5th editions
of the GB Guide, yeah.
Guide, what was the essential difference between those? Again, just
there are numerous differences
in relation
to
emergency exiting.
In relation to the rates of passage were the main difference, and I know that in the report that was produced by the STG, I know that there were 2 interim reports produced, and in both of those reports comparisons were made. The statistics were given in terms of flow rates based on the rates of passage in both guides, so that a comparison could be made.
Okay, so it's continually changes, it continually moves, I suppose, in terms of what it lays out.
it doesn't make any fundamental difference to the issues around the, you know, the complexity of the exiting and the need to look at looking at sort of networks because of that more complex arrangement and design, and both guides would support that.
Right, okay. But can I just ask you just another final question? If in terms of the outline business case in 2009, were you one of the consultees for that?
No.
You weren't. You weren't consulted.
No,
okay,
we
so
weren't.
right, okay. Nobody. Were you in the council at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So no, that's fine then. So that was the approval for the 40,000 stadium, the one in 2009.
We weren't consulted.
You weren't. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Horsham. Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Valerie. Valerie, as we've already discovered in this inquiry so far, a number of the rulings that we are dealing with here are subject to their subjective interpretation as such, and that has led to inconsistencies, as has been highlighted previously. And just to follow up on what the Chair was saying earlier, you don't accept that the emergency plan is the responsibility of the police and the Blue Light Services, which was in line with the Red Guide?
So in terms of our regulation of this, the certification process, we would insist that all of the designated grounds, and this is in the terms and conditions of the safety certificates, including the one that for the existing Casement Park, that each of the qualified persons or the ground management would develop an emergency plan for their ground, and they would do that in consultation with obviously the emergency services.
Yeah. As you said earlier, and I think I quote you right, PSNI representative on the STG talked about a reasonable understanding in terms of the Andersonstown Road accident.
He talked about a reasonable foreseeable scenario.
Yeah. Okay. But if all the parties to the emergency plan, you know, are all to be consulted there, then why was the STG going after solely the GAA for an emergency plan? Was that because it was the client, or?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Why was the STG demanding that the GAA come up with the document of as an emergency plan?
As the owners of the ground, it's incumbent on the owners of the ground to produce the arrangements for the ground.
It's one step further, and it's their legal duty to do so.
Yeah, yeah. But a lot of this is actually dependent on other sources such as the STG make up the representatives thereon, including the PSI.
The STG, I think we need the STG. Our role as a council and the STG was an advisory role in relation to the design. We were asked to comment on the design and you know, and to give, you know, look at all the various scenarios associated with that design, and if there were any concerns or issues, to raise those, which we did. In terms of actually issuing the safety certificate, as I say, that's a separate process. That's not done through the STG. It is the council's role to do that, and we will do that once we know what the circumstances are.
And I get that actually, but the emergency plan, this is where the inconsistencies here. When was the emergency plan for the Kingspan Stadium and for Windsor issued? Was it before or after the appointment of the contractor?
Okay, I think we're talking about two different things. Respectfully, sorry, the emergency. What we're talking about is the emergency exiting capacity of the ground, not an emergency plan.
You've talked about this before, but I'm talking about the emergency plan in this case.
The contingency plan to the ground. That a contingency plan we would ask for that as part of a lot of different things that we would ask for in relation to a ground in terms of the ground management before the safety certificate would be issued.
Before or after the appointment of the contractor was?
It would be at an emergency. I'm sorry, perhaps I don't understand. You have to excuse me. Are you talking about a contingency plan for a major incident occurring at the ground? Are you talking about emergency exiting capacity?
I'm talking about the emergency plan here at this point. This is the one that's responsibility for that the police and the other Blue Light Services have.
That would
Emergency
be...
exit, there's two different entries.
No, they're completely different.
Yeah, well, one's for inside the city,
Emergency exiting capacity has to be determined at an early stage in the design process, so that we can ensure that that the design is going to facilitate the maximum capacity.
Well, roughly speaking, one's for inside the city and one's for the immediate environs. Is that not right?
No.
Right. The other safeguard that STG have is that they are required then to sign off on the project pre-construction and also post-construction. Is that not a real safeguard that's included in terms of the delivery of a safe stadium?
The STG, and my understanding and what was set out to me by, as I say, in that letter initially from the Permanent Secretary of DCAL, was that we would look at the various scenarios that were put to us in relation to the design, and we would provide advice and support to the STG around that, and that then, yes, my understanding was that we would present a report prior to the design being finalised and planning permission being sought. But as I say, that didn't happen.
From design stage, there are two Loctite devices there that will be there pre and post construction for the STG to sign off on.
The STG will not sign off on a final post construction. At the end of the day, what will happen is then the safety certification process kicks in, and the council will issue the safety certificate for the safe capacity of the ground and the terms and conditions that are appropriate to managing that ground and managing that safe capacity within the ground.
On the back of STG signing off?
No.
Okay, Chair. Dominic Bradley.
Thanks, Chair. Morning. You said there, am I right in saying that the main sticking point for the new design regarding emergency exiting was in the case of a scenario where people were unable to evacuate through the main Andersonstown Road exit, and that was described by the police, as a possible exclusion zone being established there. So that was the main sticking point.
Well, it was raised as a foreseeable scenario by a member of STG, by the police, and in terms of that, we were then sort of looking at the emergency exiting capacity, and the sticking point was really more how the exiting system would be used under those circumstances.
Yes.
Given that there was the modelling showed for exiting under normal conditions. The modelling showed that there's about 72% of the people would be exiting via the Andersonstown Road. So given the design, and it was really more, we felt that we needed to see how that exiting system and that main concourse would actually work. If you took that large proportion of exiting out of it, because, as I said before, the concourse is an oval shape, and it has varying widths.
It's not.
So, there's parts of the concourse that would be used, and the modelling was able to show that the way in which people would exit that under normal exiting conditions. There's parts of that where the flow would be maintained, and it would be maintained as a free-flowing exit system, and that all the spectators could exit into that free-flowing exit system within 8 minutes, as is the required standard, and that's for your exiting. So it was able to show that 38,000 spectators could do that under normal exiting conditions. What the issue then was, if you take out 72% of the final exiting in that system, and you have a concourse, how would people then use that concourse? Because they would be entering into it and travelling and flowing in it in a different way. So it was really what we wanted.
In different directions?
Potentially in different directions. And you could end up then with a situation where you have people who perhaps enter into in a wider part, that potentially they could then, be then moving and flowing into a narrower part, which could then create this funneling effect, which is obviously would be a potential for crushing. And also, people, when they're exiting, the 8 minutes in terms of getting people, from, the seated accommodation and into an exit system, that 8 minutes, whilst it's in relation to fire safety, it's also based around experience and research in terms of crowd behaviour. And, basically, it's a time that people will be happy to take to get into a free-flowing exit system, before panic will set in, basically. So you have this idea of, well, what we needed to know was how this concourse, this main exiting system, could operate under those conditions without becoming congested. And, where there's potential, there's certain points on that exiting system which would narrow, so you would want to know where those points were, and then from that you would also then be looking at the final exit widths. Would they be sufficient to prevent a build-up and a back-up, into that, to stop it from being free-flowing and to cause congestion? So it was really a matter of getting some, because of the complexity of all of that, we needed to see modelling. And even, even if the modelling was showing that 38,000 spectators couldn't evacuate in the time, at least it would have given us an idea of where the issues were that could have been looked at or modified in the design. Should it be identifying other places of reasonable safety or any of those things. So we really just needed that additional information to look at the, how the exiting capacity could be achieved, the emergency exiting capacity could be achieved.
Thanks, that's very useful. Would I be right in saying that under normal circumstances there was reasonable contentment that emergency exiting could be carried out?
What we had was, in terms of the crowd modelling, there were concerns initially because it, if you're looking at the guide, it would, it does suggest that there should be an even distribution of exiting, really, or reasonable number of exits. But looking at the modelling did show that exiting under normal conditions could be achieved within the standards, for 38,000 spectators.
Just as a matter of interest, can I ask you, that exceptional circumstance that the police raised, right? Would that not have been a consideration when you granted a safety certificate for over 31,000?
The reason, Alex, the reason that the difference in that, there are various reasons. The first thing to say is that the existing Casement Park is a completely different design. And the standards that that we would have taken into consideration in relation to it are slightly different. For example, in the existing stadium, you have a very wide outer circulation area, and that outer circulation area could be used as a place of reasonable safety. Okay. You also can include the pitch. If you have to evacuate onto the pitch, you can include that in your emergency exiting capacity calculations, which you can't in the new for new construction, and also the flow rates would have been slightly different, the way in which the exit routes would have been very different. So, based on the circumstances as they are at Casement now, that's what determined the safe capacity. And basically, the exiting, there's sufficient emergency exiting capacity for that number.
Okay, so under those circumstances, you were content that the old Casement Park, let's call it, could deal with the emergency exiting,
Yes,
even if there was an exclusion, so
Yeah.
at the Anderstown Road.
In terms of the
Right.
capacity,
Okay.
yes.
We've been told by a number of witnesses here that establishing an acceptable emergency exiting plan was an ongoing process of refinement in the dialogue between yourselves, the STG, the design team, and so forth. Would that be true?
I think it was certainly discussed. I think the emergency exiting capacity was discussed regularly at meetings throughout the process. And I suppose when you talked about a sticking point earlier, but I suppose the sticking point for us was that it was very difficult for for an emergency exiting strategy to have been developed without sufficient information to show how the exiting systems would have worked under emergency exiting, an emergency exiting situation. So really, again, the sticking point was that lack of information in relation to sort of, the flows in the crowd modelling.
But we were led to believe that you did request further crowd modelling to be done.
We did.
And you were awaiting that. We were led to believe that the judicial review process then slowed things down and prevented further work being done at that particular time.
Well, as I say, our involvement in the STG was all through the chair of the STG. So we would have obviously, we would have been waiting for him to convene meetings and to discuss the issues, and those things weren't really discussed with us, at the STG.
They weren't discussed at the STG?
In terms of the judicial review and those issues.
So were you not aware that there was a judicial review ongoing?
Oh, yes, yes.
And would that not have led you to believe that the process would be halted temporarily or at least slowed down?
Well, I did assume, personally, that was what was, there was, things...
So it's reasonable to assume that the modelling information which you are awaiting was prevented by the slowing down due to the judicial review?
This witness can't. That requires this witness to speculate, and that's a completely unfair question.
Thank you, Lisa, that comment. I think it's unfair to ask people to speculate. They can comment on the things that they know about. They can comment on the things they've been involved in, but that's a question for others that can be put to others.
Okay. Well, I thought she said previously that you had been aware of the judicial review and that would affect matters.
Absolutely, and
You cannot speculate as to why the requested information was never produced.
Well, as I said, she did realise that the judicial review would lead to a slowing down of the process. So
I think
it wouldn't
Perhaps shouldn't have said that in the sense that I was aware of it certainly going on in the background, but it's not right. It isn't for me to speculate around that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gordon Dunn.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much. Your evidence today has been very enlightening. Now, during recent evidence sessions we have had here, we've talked about the drawings that were developed, and we were told last week that the drawings that went forward for planning permission were developed or brought through to an operational design and submitted, I understand, in June 2013. What input had the STG into these drawings? Are you aware of any input into those drawings?
In terms of the STG process, what happened for us as a representative on that group, we would have been presented with various situations, plans, drawings, some of which weren't dimensional or were just outline drawings. And we would have, there were 4 STG meetings in 2013. And at each of those meetings, we would have been given some drawings, but we were never clear. You know, we were only, whatever we were given was given to us by the chair of the STG, so we could only comment on those drawings at that time. I think, you know, part of our issue in terms of acting in that role was that, you know, we needed to. We were not sure that we were getting issues that were raised and drawings that pertain to those issues. It was hard to have look at the whole thing in that wider context of design. So it tended to be drawings around issues and particular areas that we would have looked at or commented on through the STGs. But yes, we did see plans and we did comment, and our comments are recorded in the minutes of those meetings.
Yeah, but we understand that the drawings that went forward were not signed off by the STG.
I don't think it was the role of the STG to sign off drawings. Certainly, I didn't have terms of reference other than the paragraph in the letter from the Permanent Secretary to say the role of the STG, but we didn't have terms of reference, but we were never asked to sign off on drawings.
You weren't? Right. Would it not have been a reasonable thing to involve the STG in the initial designs of the building?
Again, I don't feel it's my position to comment on that.
Okay.
I think the witness fairly has set out that the role of the STG was really as a consultative forum, and you can see within that there are clearly experts whose information would be relevant and would inform forward planning, and planning very often is an iterative process. So I think you need to be careful about elevating the role of the STG as something that it's not.
Yeah, I understand that, but I do feel under integrated project teams, which are the requirement of DFP, there is a requirement to engage with all parties, all stakeholders, and obviously the safety requirements and the safety standards are paramount. So you would expect early engagement.
Well, we would accept that. We would accept that. In fact, and anybody who is proposing any development that involves any statutory undertaker would be foolish not to consult and to take their ear in relation to their proposals.
Okay.
Could I just perhaps, would it be helpful for me just to read out again, what, in terms of our invitation to be a member on the STG, what that we were advised that would involve? I mean, in the letter from the Permanent Secretary at that time, Rosalie Flanagan, it stated that the STG process, it was outlined that Sport NI, as the overseeing body, would be responsible for recording all agreements, queries and actions required to ensure that the STG was in a position to confirm that all reasonably foreseeable safety scenarios had been considered and anticipated within the design to achieve full spectator capacity within the safety certification process. We were invited onto that as in an advisory capacity.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, yeah, but I do still feel that there's a fundamental requirement to be engaged early on in the process.
Gordon, we'll take that up with others.
Okay, that's fine. Right, you talked about the concerns of the PSNI, and I understand you said about reasonable foreseeable scenario. So how would you see that in relation to risk? Would that be relatively high risk?
Well, from our point of view, PSNI is a statutory consultee in the certification process. So, as a member of the STG and as a statutory consultee in relation to safety certification, if they raised that as a reasonably foreseeable scenario, it would have been wrong of us not to take that on board.
Right, I appreciate that. So it could, in the terms of risk then, it would be relatively high.
I couldn't comment on that.
Okay. You talked about the Casement Park, the capacity of it. In 2010, the safety certificate was issued for 31,600. Right. Has there been much experience of crowds there of that capacity in recent times?
Not, I could check, but not in recent times. There have been large crowds at the ground.
Yes, I understand for the Michaela event, which was very successful, there was a huge crowd, relatively huge crowd at it.
I would have to check, to be honest. I just
I
don't have that
understand it's
information.
about 18,000. Right. You talked about the difference in how you would evacuate the new and the existing. Could you just outline again? You talked about a wider circulation area. I take it that's a wider circulation under the existing building, under the existing development, as against no outer circulation under the new proposal. Is that?
There's,
did I understand?
The guide refers to zones, and I think this has maybe been raised before. The guide refers to zones, and with the new design, there's no outer circulation zone, and with the existing stadium as it is, because it's it's a different design entirely, and you have a fairly wide outer circulation zone, separated. So it does create the opportunity there for places of reasonable safety.
Okay.
In terms of calculating your emergency exiting capacity.
So obviously you lose those with the new building because it spreads out and takes up much more of the site.
It's just a different design.
Totally different
just
design.
Just a different design, yeah.
So,
but you have a big exiting system in the via the concourse, the main concourse.
Yeah.
In the new design, but it's different
okay.
in terms of that outer
zone. So there was little or no outer circulation under the new design. Are you aware of any discussions as to how to address that? To meet requirements for the emergency evacuation?
No, the discussions that we were aware of was the issue of commissioning additional crowd modelling to look at how the concourse would be used. Because, the exiting system in this case is a place of reasonable safety. It's just how it would be used to prevent congestion, during any sort of emergency exiting.
Are you aware of any discussions about acquiring properties external to the site?
No.
You're not aware of that?
No, I'm not.
Okay. That wasn't discussed at any time that you're aware of?
At the STG meetings, no.
Right. Okay.
John, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Could just pose a question there on your paper that you've given to us and that you refer to is extremely clear and comprehensive. You mentioned there that no further crowd modelling for the emergency exiting was provided, so a final report has not yet been produced, and that's still true as of today.
Yes.
So in the beginning of July 2015, there is no emergency exiting strategy. And you mentioned there 13th of November 2014, the 7th meeting, it was agreed that the STG would continue to request a copy of the emergency exiting strategy. That's in the note for that date.
Yes.
And going back to 16th of October 2013, Mr Southern agreed to commission an emergency exiting strategy report with computer modelling to illustrate how emergency exiting would be achieved. So between October 2013 and July 2015, which is about 1 year and 6, 7, 8, 9, 1 year, 9 months roughly, over that period, there has not been an emergency exiting plan produced for the STG to consider.
No, not for me.
But from past experience of stadiums and certification, have you ever been involved in the process where someone was developing one of these strategies or plans? It seems a very long time. That's what amazes me. I can't imagine that it takes a year and 9 months.
No, it shouldn't. I mean, if the modelling is commissioned, it shouldn't take that length of time. I wouldn't have thought.
Is this a computer program that's run and it produces a figure?
Yeah, for the exiting under normal conditions, the modelling for evacuation for egress was carried out by Mott MacDonald and presented. So I imagine they would have been, I don't know, but I imagine that they would have been the people who then maybe could have been commissioned to do this, but
I just find it difficult to understand how it takes a year, 9 months, and at the end of that, it still can't produce one. Basil McRae.
Thank you. Could I just let's see? There's a letter from Populous dated the 7th of April 2014, and it states, so this is 24. I could confirm that the current design proposals complies with the technical requirements of the Guide to Safety at Sports Grounds 5th edition, the Green Guide, and the Northern Ireland Guide to Safety at Sports Ground, the Red Guide, in relation to an emergency exit for a 38,000 capacity event. So that is a letter from Populous to the owners of the stadium, the GAA. Do you think that is correct, that letter?
again, I'm not sure that I'm in a position to comment on it without having the information that we've requested with regard to this.
Yes, Chair. I mean, I think the point that the witness has consistently made is that the modelling was requested in respect of the emergency situation, particularly with the Andersonstown Road exits unavailable, and that modelling to date has not been provided.
Well, all I'm asking is there's a statement here. I confirm the current design proposal complies with the technical requirements. Is that correct, or is it not correct?
Well, sorry.
I think the
point. Sorry,
could I take a point of information?
Well, if I'll make my point first, and then we'll come in. If I'm understanding this right, there's been a statement made there in a letter or an email, but we can't. No one can know because nobody has ever managed to produce a document.
Exactly. Ms Brown can't comment yes or no in respect of that because she doesn't have the information that allows her to say yes, that's correct, or no, it's wrong.
With respect, Ms Brown quoted certain issues from the Green Guide and the Red Guide, which I am going to invite her to restate.
Yes.
That is the issue that she's shown. I can ask her if she has got some knowledge of the Red and the Green Guide. Would you be familiar with these documents?
I would, yes.
Extremely.
That is the point that I'm asking, that I have a document here and I'm seeking to take advice of the witness's expertise. So I'm just saying to you, that is a letter from Mike Trice, who also gave witness to this committee at the last meeting. And the point I wanted, if you'll bear with me on this to see if I can get it, this is referring to item 9.7 on the Red Guide, which is the egress time, not the emergency exit time, but you may wish to familiarise yourself.
What number was that?
This is 9.7 of the Red Guide, page 16 of Paul Scott's papers.
9.7, not 10.
9.7.
Or 10.7.
Right, and I want to compare and contrast the 9.7 with 9.9. That's where I'm going with this, just so that you understand it. Because what Mike Trice said to us at the last committee meeting was that the emergency exiting time, the 8 minutes, if you like, was not, this was his statement, to exit the stadium, but to get to an area where you could get free moving circulation.
Yes, it would.
Right. So what he's saying is, and this I know this is to do with egress time, right, rather than emergency exit. But does 9.7 say that for egress time, in the second paragraph, the egress time is the total time taken for all spectators in normal conditions to leave an area of viewing accommodation and enter into a free-flowing exit system? Right?
That's right, yes.
That's what it says for the egress time. And it also mentions in the 5th paragraph of that that the limit of 8 minutes has been set as a result of research and experience, which suggests that spectators are less likely to become agitated. And it mentions provided they enter an exit system at an acceptable rate or are familiar with the sports ground and can identify a point of exit. Right, so that's egress time. It then mentions in 9.9, as stated in 9.7, there is a difference between egress times and emergency evacuation times. And it talks about the rate of passage, but it says that it's to a place of safety in the event of an emergency.
Yes.
It does not mention a comparative place of safety or a relative place of safety. It says to a place of safety.
Yes.
Is there any difference between a comparative place of safety or a relative place of safety?
Okay. Place of safety is then defined in the Red Guide under 15.16. Place of safety is a place which people can reach safely via the escape route and which will be safe for the effects of fire. From the effects of fire, it may be a road, walkway or an open space adjacent to or even within the boundaries of the sports ground.
So when I look at how does that compare with a relative place of safety?
Okay. The term of reasonable place of safety is used in the Green Guide, the 5th edition.
Yes.
And it is basically, it defines a reasonable place of safety.
Yes. What zone would that be?
But it could be in any of the zones.
Okay,
Well,
right.
not any of the zones. It can't be in Zone 1 or or Zone 2. But it could be. I mean, the concourse. The concourse at in the new design at Casement could be a reasonable place of safety.
So
because it has our fire resistance.
So that was the argument that Mr. Trice was putting forward.
I understand that, yes.
And what I'm seeking to, because I hadn't picked that up in the earlier design,
Right.
if the concourse is a relative place of safety,
Yes.
is that acceptable to say then that the stadium would comply with the green or the red, well, let's say the Green Guide, since it's mentioned in the Green Guide?
Yes, but when you look at the other provisions and the other parts of the guidance that relate to exit systems, some of the things that I've already mentioned around, there's an exit system should be free-flowing. There should be able to, when you look at rate of passage, I mean, again, even the rates of passage are taken as maximum because rates of passage can't necessarily be sustained over a period of time. It talks about that in the guidance as well. In relation to exiting, I mean, if it's not free-flowing, your exit system, now the concourse we know is an exit system, okay? So if it's not free-flowing and there's congestion in it for some of the reasons that I've mentioned earlier, then that is not going to be a place of reasonable safety.
So there is a emergency evacuation exercise that was modelling undertaken by TINOS, which I think is Smoke McDonald's fire experts, on the 26th of November 2014. Are you familiar with that report? Have you any side of it?
No.
So it mentions, you might just help me, I'm happy to give you a copy, or you can just listen to what the words, so just tell me if you need more of it. But this is a report carried out, and it looks at the impact on the emergency evacuation time. It looks at a number of considerations. If the North Stand, all exits are unavailable, it comes to their model of 29 minutes. So would that be a concern for you if this is on the 26th of November, just before the initial review, so there is modelling. It's 29 minutes, and if 50% of the exits are available, it's 13 minutes.
No, it's on the plan.
Are there any mitigating circumstances that you could use to get over the 29 minutes that would have it as an exit time?
And when you talk about 29 minutes, is that for final exit, or is that for exit from the seated accommodation?
Well, unfortunately, all I can tell you is the bit of information that I have here, but there is modelling. That's because you had said you were expecting modelling.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, well, here is modelling. This is the date that it's on. But it mentions a number of mitigating factors to this 29 minutes and 13 minutes and 10 minutes. In fact, the only system that actually gives 6 variations. The only system that meets the conditions of 8 minutes is the one where it says normal conditions, all exits available. If any exit is not available, it exceeds the 8 minutes. It's 9, 9, 10, 13 and 29. So I just want to ask you, because this is in their report, it says the calculation, to talk about mitigation measures here, I just wonder if there's any comment that you have this. The calculation of the measures makes no allowance for the phased evacuation or use of the pitch. What they're saying is the 29 minutes could be mitigated because you could use the pitch. It says, whilst the red and the green guides recommend against pitch evacuation for newly constructed grounds, its use in the context of contingency planning would be sensible, as would be an obvious and readily accessible safe holding area within the ground. Is that a reasonable statement for them to make in mitigation?
Well, I think it goes back to this issue of confusing contingency planning and emergency exiting capacity. And the guide is very clear, and I read the bit out in the guide earlier which says clearly that the pitch cannot be considered when determining emergency exiting capacity for the ground. Now, whether you choose to use it and whether it's possible to use it and as part of a contingency planning process, that's a different issue.
So they say in the next point, just in this, and it's okay, we're sort of in agreement, it's for elucidation of the point. This is their argument. The main benefit of using the pitch would be to control the crowd build-up on the concourses. Spectators could access the pitch from all of the lower seating, thus relieving the loading on the concourses.
Well, again, I'm going to say that in determining the emergency exiting capacity, you cannot take into consideration in your calculations evacuation onto the pitch.
So I have read clearly, and I might just finish whenever I'm going to ask why it says that, but I understand that that is not a matter of interpretation, not something where people have one view. It is a decal written document that you cannot include the pitch in your emergency evacuation.
Or new construction.
Or new construction. The final point that it says in this document, which I think is interesting, is it says, this is in relation to the pitch measures, the pitch evacuation. In any case, that's my word, the quote is, there would be little reduction in the overall evacuation time because the rate at which people can leave the stadium is ultimately dictated by the width of the site exits. So even using the pitch doesn't really improve matters because you still cannot get them to a place of safety.
Well, it says clearly in the guide that the pitch can't be used, and I'm sorry to keep repeating this, but without actually having sight of that document and being able to consider it, I can't really comment on it beyond what I'm saying in terms of not being able to use the pitch in determining, the emergency exiting capacity of a ground.
Okay, so I'll just move off on that point just by confirming that in 9.12 of the red guide, it says, as stated in 9.9, the use of the pitch or area of activity for emergency evacuation should not form part of the capacity calculation. And you have already quoted, I think, from
Fifth edition.
from the green guide as well. I think it was 10.
10.5, is it?
10.
I can't remember.
10.5. 10. So just to get it right.
10.9, sorry.
Yes, 10.9. The emergency exits. It should not do that. Just clarification. Rate of passage per metre per person on level ground coming from the Green Guide is approximately what on level ground?
Oh, I'd have to look at the figures for this again, sorry. Do you have them here?
Or you can do the Green Guide if it's handier. You can tell me the difference. Is really what I'm looking for. It's just comparative. People ask what were the differences between the two guides.
Actually, I'll tell you what, I'll just take them from the report, shall I?
It might be page 22 of the report that I'm looking at.
The rates of passage for per metre on level ground is 82 for the Green Guide and 109 maximum for the Red Guide, and on steps it's 66 for the 5th edition and 73 for the Red Guide.
And just in the report before that, there's a huge number of calculations with stand by stand, concourse by concourse, where it's evaluated to see what the outworkings. Who produced that report?
Those calculations were produced by Paul Scott.
And do you agree with the calculations? Do they seem reliable to you?
Yes, we were in agreement with them, yes.
The final point that I want to take you through, because it seemed to be quite significant, that there was a meeting, I think you said in your document, on the 16th of October,
yes,
2013. Now, if I look at some proprietary emails for this, this is between Carl Southern and Paul Scott on the 9th of October, and he mentions in this, the intention is to host a page-turn mini workshop for you, Populous, MMD, GAA, DCAL and whatever. So this is prepared to that, and it mentions in this exiting strategy, internal and external. Does that accord with your recollection that there would have been concern about the emergency exiting scheme at that time?
yes.
And subsequently to the meeting that you had on the 16th, then there would have been an exchange of emails where, amongst other things, people suggested that there was some surprise from the members of the STG that DCAL were surprised that there was a problem.
Sorry, what email was that? No,
Let me just see if I can find that particular one. If you found it, it'll save me looking for it. I think it's around about the 20th of October. Here we go. The 22nd of October, between Paul Scott and Carl Southern. It says, the group are surprised at the term belated requirement, as this matter discussed with you in early January 2013 and emphasised by the group at the meeting you attended on the 12th of April 2013. Concerns regarding emergency exiting have been discussed regularly since April. Would that be your recollection?
I have seen that, yes. We weren't copied into those emails, I think, at the time, but I think Paul Scott sent them through to one of my colleagues subsequently.
So, would you, from recollection, be able to support the statement in them that emergency exiting had been a concern for quite some time during 2013?
Yes, yes.
And that it should not have been a surprise to the department that this is an issue?
Well, it was raised, and the department were present at some of the meetings at which it was raised in 2013 at the STG.
Okay. So, My final point is the one that you started with, which was the letter from the Permanent Secretary, Rosie Flanagan, at the time, and that is where she says that it is essential that when the department approves the design to go forward for planning. Now, I admit that this is, I'll just let you find it, this is to do with Windsor.
Yes.
But what, so this is talking about, it says we have confirmation from SNIOB, the PSNI and Belfast City Council that all relevant and reasonably foreseeable safety measures have been considered and anticipated with the design. In relation to Windsor, was that done?
Yes.
Do you recall what format that the STG would have said to the department or to the Permanent Secretary, yes, we have considered these and we're okay? How was that done?
It was done in the same format as the reports that were put through to DCAL for casement.
Yes.
It was done in a report form, in a similar report form, setting out the issues.
So you would have set out the issues for Windsor, but said, having considered the matter, we are content that the department should do whatever the department has to do?
Well, yes, we had no other particular issues. So we again went through a process where we addressed all the issues.
But there would have been a conclusion at some stage, or you would have said, yes, we've addressed all of these issues, and on the basis of what we have seen, we are content, or what would...
We agreed to the report that was submitted to DCAL, yes, in our advisory capacity, that
Yes.
it was accurate, yeah.
So, the corresponding report, was there a corresponding report for casement?
Well, we sent reports through, interim reports, and three different reports were sent through to DCAL with regard to Casement Park.
Yes, but they weren't. Just my final point is just to say, but unlike with Windsor, you didn't get to the stage where you were able to say that you were satisfied.
No, we were still raising issues in those reports.
And you would have felt that that fulfilled your terms of your guiding principles that you were set up with, that you had drawn matters to attention but had not yet concluded.
Well, I would have to say, and I'm going to say this again, we didn't have terms of reference for the STG, but certainly the chair of the STG, that was the approach he was taking, and was writing those reports on behalf of the group, circulating them to the group, and then the group were, either in agreement with what was in the report, and the reports were agreed by all members of the STG before they were submitted to DCAL.
So I'd just like to thank you for the clarity that you've been able to bring to the matter and commend you for the good work that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Dominic, you have a point of clarification.
Yes, Chair, just wanted to ask about the status of Mr Walsh here. Is he here as a witness who's part of the process of developing the emergency evacuation plan for State Casement, or is he here as a legal advisor to Ms Brown?
I'm here as a senior officer of...
Sorry, I'm asking the Chair, not
Oh,
you.
sorry.
Well, Clark was the...
Chair, our understanding was Mr Walsh was required to clarify the position of the council. That when we asked Mrs Brown to attend, we asked what colleagues she would need for that clarification. We didn't inquire any further than that.
But Chair, it seems that he's acting as if this were a courthouse and that he's providing legal advice to the witness. And that's something, in my experience, at Assembly Statutory Committee, which is quite unprecedented.
Chair, I'd like to say that I was supportive when this group across the table asked for the GAA to bring along their advisors and their consultants, because people are there to be helpful in this.
As a group.
And as far as I'm concerned, the witness that we're calling is Belfast City Council. And we're trying to find out information here, and I am entirely supportive of the two people being here. It's been most helpful.
I think that the point that Mr McRae's made is the key one, that we've got clarity around a lot of issues this morning, and we should be grateful.
Sure, I'm not saying that we haven't. I'm just saying that from the point of view of precedent, that in my experience, I've never been at a committee where a witness had a legal advisor who intervened on a number of occasions accompanying that witness.
I think Mr Walsh is a senior official of the City Council.
Yeah, he's described here as fine solicitor.
That's correct. That's his position. That's correct.
So he is legal advisor to the witness then?
He is the town solicitor. And I think that we don't want to detract in any way from the importance of the clarity that has been brought to the issue this morning. Next person, William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair. And just for Mr Bradley's information, when I was a member of the OFM-DFM committee, a number of religious orders brought legal advisors with them as well, so this is not a precedent. Can I thank you both very much for your attendance here today and the professionalism, clarity and certainty you brought to this, Valerie, and your answering it, because I had many questions and many of them have just been scored off because of the answers that you've given, and it is good to get clarity and certainty instead of people interpreting things as they see them. Last week I asked the GAA if they were looking at remodelling the plans they had for Casement Park in terms of going forward, and I think they don't have plans at the moment, and they're looking at new plans or designs or whatever, and we'll bring them forward in due process. Around the crowd modelling issue, in terms of those plans that they might have, in terms of bringing them forward, to make sure that they meet the criterion that you've clearly set out today, would I be right in saying, having listened to you, that they can't actually finalise those plans and those designs until the information that is outstanding around modelling is actually provided?
Well, I think it depends on what the information is, and and I think we would have to look at that and see what the information provides. I mean, I haven't had access to the report that Mr McVeigh referred to, so I'm really not in a position to say at this stage. I would need to see what is put forward.
Okay, but I'm not trying to tie you down on that, but perhaps if you ask it in a more general way. In any scenario, in any stadium, modelling, you have to have certainty around the issue of modelling before design and build can happen?
For this particular design, because of the complexity of it, it really needs, in exiting, you need to look at that sort of networking approach, because it's not just simple exiting, which you can have in other grounds, but it's the design. So we would definitely need to have further information around the crowd flows.
You did say, if I'm right, emergency exiting has to be addressed at an early stage.
Yes.
And that all new stadia have to be built and designed to the Green Guide standard. I mean, I welcome that clarity, Chairman. We have struggled to get that clarity over the last number of weeks, and I really do appreciate that. And they have to be compliant to the 5th edition. Would that be right?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of your experience and professional judgment, Valerie, do you think that a stadium on the site we're talking about, 38 to 40,000, can meet that Green Guide 5th edition in terms of emergency exiting in particular?
And you're asking me to speculate. It depends on the design.
Right, exactly. That's fine. That's all I wanted to know, Chair. Thank you.
Leslie Cree.
Thanks, Chair. And good afternoon. William was saying there that a lot of them struck off. He's helped them manage to strike a few of mine off here as well. That's the advantage maybe of coming at the end, but it also gives you more time to listen to the evidence. But certainly I also would thank you and Mr Walsh, for helping to keep it focused.
Yep.
Which is very important. We're not always very good at that. You have explained the main issues. Some people, for example, were telling us, don't worry about certification. The council does that at the end of the exercise. We know that that's not now the case. Others have told us blue light services will sort that out, but that's not the case. But I'm just wondering if you could maybe clarify for us the difference between an emergency exiting plan and a critical incident plan. Are they treated the same way? One comes from without, coming from within.
To be honest, what we're addressing at the moment and what this issue is about is to do with emergency exiting capacity.
Understand that.
And based on, you know, whatever is, you know, decided around emergency exiting capacity, you would expect there to be operational arrangements put in place as to how that would operate. And certainly that should form part of any wider contingency plan that would be developed around any major incident occurring. But the emergency exiting capacity is something that would be considered as part of the general egress from the ground. You know, you need to consider both together in terms of you know, basically exiting from the ground. Can it be achieved under normal conditions? Can it be achieved? What's the capacity when you're looking at under normal conditions? Because exiting capacity is one of the factors that would be taken into consideration in determining safe capacity of the ground. So, as I said at the start, for safety certification, you look at the holding capacity, the entrancing capacity, and the exiting capacity of the ground, and you look at each of those, and whichever is the lower determines your safe capacity. So, emergency exiting capacity is part of the exiting capacity, and so the planning around how you achieve that in terms of you know, safe operations should certainly form part of your contingency arrangement. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yes, it is, but I can see how they can dovetail. In fact, that would be parallel at some stage.
You couldn't separate them completely, but you do need to when you're thinking about it in the initial stages.
You did refer to the point that all documents to decal from the STG were unanimously agreed. Did you ever have any direct communication from decal on emergency exiting itself? Did you ever respond or acknowledge it? Or?
Anything that we had was through the STG and through the chair of the STG in relation to that. I mean, there were meetings that representatives from decal were present at, and discussions took place around emergency exiting, and we had the meeting, you know, with various meetings where there were representatives from decal, and certainly those discussions would have taken place.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. Alderman McMullen.
Thank you, Chair. Well, can I just ask you a couple of questions here? You see there when we talk about emergency exiting and the reports you get reports from the STG on emergency exiting for the stadium?
We were invited to a meeting where it was a wider meeting where certainly the fire engineer on behalf of Mott MacDonald did present some modelling and arrangements for exiting under normal conditions.
Yeah. Was this raised as like what they would call a red flag issue, or was it raised under a planning, you know, as a process ongoing?
The issue of emergency exiting capacity,
yes.
It was raised ongoing.
So it wasn't raised as a red flag issue?
It was raised as issues around the design.
So it was an ongoing process?
Over the period that the STG met in 2013, yes,
right,
it was
so it wasn't
raised.
a showstopper then, it was an ongoing process, the planning of the...
Better not to put words into the mouth, I think, of the witness.
No, and I don't mean to do that, and I think you're intelligent enough to know how I'm doing this. So it definitely wasn't a showstopper or anything else. It was an ongoing process.
It was the emergency exiting was one of the emergency exiting capacity was one of the considerations and concerns that were raised throughout the process.
Yes, and thank you for that. Can I go back to the process on the not using the pitch? Can the pitch be used as a holding area to a place of reasonable safety?
The pitch can be used to evacuate people onto. There's nothing in the guide to say that it can't. Mm-hmm. What it actually says is, I mean, what it actually Well, when I say it can't, there are issues around that. If you are going to use it, there are certain issues, and the guide does specify in terms of the fact that you would need to be able to get people off that, via a different exit route.
That's right.
But or an alternative exit route. But the actual requirement in the guide says that you cannot consider it as part of your calculations in relation to emergency exiting capacity for new construction.
But it can be used.
There's nothing to say that it can't be
Yes.
used under certain circumstances.
So are we saying there's an interpretation in there?
No.
No. So it's hard and fast.
It's very clear.
You can't
in
use
both,
the pitch. At the same time, you can use the pitch.
No, it's very clear that you cannot consider evacuation onto the pitch as part of your calculations when determining the emergency exiting capacity from the ground.
Where does the ground management come in all of this here, and as far as the emergency exiting and keeping the people flowing? You did say earlier on the valley there, but people turning left or turning right and causing a jam, narrowing down the concourse, etc. What's the role of the ground management, stewarding, etc., which your council would have responsibility for?
Okay, well, in terms of safety management, safety management is an essential part of the safety certification process. And as I said before, you have two factors that you need to take into consideration. You have the physical factors, in the ground and the infrastructure, and then you have the safety management construction. So you've a P factor and you've an S factor, and they basically go from 0.1 up to 1, and you for each of those, and you would apply those depending on the safety management arrangements. So for a new development such as this, you would be striving to have a P factor and an S factor of 1.
Yes.
And you would expect that for new construction.
Right.
So so it would be really important that there were good arrangements for stewarding, for crowd management, for all of those things,
Yes.
And for the safety officer to be,
Yes.
on top of all of
It all
that.
feeds into safe exiting
Yes.
and work from.
Well, it's for the whole use of the ground.
How many would the ground hold as a holding area? What's the holding capacity of
The holding capacity
of the proposed-
for the proposed development was 38,000.
on the pitch?
No, in the seated accommodation.
What would the pitch hold?
I don't know.
Don't know that.
No, I'd have to look at that.
That never was raised.
It wasn't relevant to
Wasn't
the
relevant.
calculations,
No.
because you can't count it in the calculations for emergency.
As a holding area to
Excellent
a place of
capacity.
relative safety, it would be relevant to know those figures.
But my colleagues could well know them. But as I say, in
Okay.
terms of the calculating the emergency exiting capacity, you cannot take the pitch into consideration.
When we got the presentation from Populous last week, we looked at the width of the exiting areas on the old stadium, we'll call it, and with the exiting ones of the new one. Are you aware of any of those, of the proposed changes to the exiting widths of the areas?
Well, I know in the design that I would have looked at, is this something that you've had more recently presented to you from Populous, or is this the existing?
The existing, the old stadium to the proposed new one.
We would have looked at, yes, there was an increase in emergency exits to the front of the ground, yes.
And would that help to evacuate proposed 38,000?
Well, I think definitely that exiting, the additional exit and that additional exit width to the front of the ground was important in being able to achieve exiting for 38,000 under normal conditions.
Yes, and the exiting onto the exit widths onto the Anderson Town Road, Owenvara and Moorland.
I'm not aware that the exit widths for Owenvara and Moorland in the proposed plans that we saw were increased. I know they were certainly increased to the front of the ground.
If they're increased to those other areas, I know it's not putting words in your mouth now, but if they're increased to those other areas along with the increase to the front, how would that go with a capacity of 38,000?
Well, again, it would certainly be one of the considerations that would need to be looked at in relation to, you know, the
Time.
emergency,
Yeah.
you know, exiting capacity, because obviously, you know, if you know, that will be a factor in how, you know, in how free flowing
Yeah.
you know, an exit system is.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alright, are you anticipating there this idea of knocking down houses to widen the exits?
No.
I thought that's what you were suggesting.
Oh no, I never mentioned a house.
No, but if the thing's very narrow between houses, how do you widen it without...
I didn't mention between houses. I'm still in the stadium. I haven't left the stadium.
Does the stadium not lead out into Owenvara and Moorland?
Oh, I'm sure, yes, indeed it does. But I'm talking about the doors leading. You know,
It was just to get clarity around it, that was all.
a wee bit like Elvis happened. Just left the stadium. No, I'm just trying to get this, you know, this whole thing to see where we are with all of this here between the council and the designers and all of that there. But, and I do appreciate what you're saying. But the time for maximum capacity to exit via the side streets on the existing Casement Park, we have here 42.54 minutes.
Right, what's the question?
So if that was increased, the width was increased of the doors, would that help along with the increases would be the proposed increases at the front?
As I said, I would need to
You need to look it up.
see all the information, you know, together so that you could look at that and see what you know,
You
how
haven't seen it
that
yet?
would work. And I haven't had sight of that.
Okay, then there's no point in that. Thank
Thank you.
Chair, we're finished.
Councillor Hoshing?
Yes, Chair, just again, if this morning's presentation has done anything, it's just highlighted the inconsistencies across the board that have been flagged previously in terms of the dealing with the three different stadia. In the case of Casement, because it's new build, then different criteria are being applied, obviously, because the pitch cannot be used. And in the populist presentation last week, and they helped Oliver, the populist people did say that the pitch could safely accommodate, in a place of reasonable safety, 58,000 people. They further stated that in the concourse area, which was defined as a place of reasonable safety, a further 38,000. You know, so those are the figures but we are looking at different criteria being applied between new build for Casement and non-new build for Windsor and.
No.
Well, can you
Windsor
explain
Park
to me
and
then?
Ravenhill are both being looked at as new
But the
build.
pitch is a place of reasonable safety in the case of Windsor.
No.
It is not.
It's not being considered in the emergency exiting capacity.
But it is considered a place
calculations.
of reasonable safety. It is there in the case of a contingency plan.
In the new design for Windsor Park, in the new stadium, when it's the same arrangements, the pitch will not be considered as will not be considered in the emergency exiting calculations for the ground. Has not been considered.
Well, this is where the uncertainty still exists, Valerie, is that definition between the emergency exiting strategy or plan and the contingency plan. So that's what I was trying to get at earlier.
The emergency, and I'll certainly try and clarify it again. I'm sorry if I haven't made it clear. What you need to look at is the emergency exiting capacity of the ground, okay? Now, the emergency exiting capacity of the ground, when you're looking at normal exiting capacity of the ground, which is a determining factor when you're determining the safe capacity of the ground, you also need to look at the emergency exiting capacity. And when you're calculating the emergency exiting capacity of the ground, you may not, according to the guide, take into consideration the use of the pitch as a place of safety. You may not take evacuation onto the pitch into your calculations in determining the emergency exiting capacity. When you're looking further down the line at developing a contingency plan for a major incident, you would certainly then take account of your exiting systems and your emergency exiting capacity and your systems and your processes around that. But for Windsor Park and for Ravenhill, Kingspan, in both of those, in the development of those stadiums, evacuation onto the pitch was not considered when calculating the emergency exiting capacity for those grounds.
And yet 10.9 says the emergency evacuation time is a calculation which, together with the rate of passage, is used to determine the capacity of the emergency exit system from the view and accommodation to a place of safety or reasonable safety in the event of emergency. It's quite clear.
And then it goes on to say that you cannot consider the pitch for new construction.
And what about the concourse then? Because what Populous told us, 30th,
yes.
and Populous told us that the concourse can safely accommodate 38,000 people.
The other thing, though, the concourse is an exit system.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
an
you
exit
said earlier,
system.
you said earlier, an exit system as proposed is a place of reasonable safety.
The concourse is a place of reasonable safety from a fire safety point of view, in that it's our fire protection.
Yeah.
It is an exit system, and therefore it has to be free flowing. So you cannot safely hold without them moving 38,000 people in that concourse.
Sure, I'm not sure we're going to get to the bottom of this, but
I thought we had got.
well, it's just on an aside. Can I just ask if Mr. Walsh is here in his own right? Then, because he had stated earlier that Paul Scott was never an employee of council.
No, I didn't say that. I said at the time that he was involved in this group, he was not a council
But
employee.
he has been employed by council.
Oh, yes, he has, yes. In the past.
He has.
Yes.
And what time was he not employed?
I wouldn't have that detail with me, Chairman, but it was some time ago that he left the council.
Right, can you get us some details perhaps of that?
As to when he left,
As
the
to when he
council's
was
employment,
employed.
yes.
As to when he was employed by council.
It was quite some time before any involvement with this.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And finally, and very finally and briefly, because the lunch is waiting, Councillor McCrae.
No, I'll just take the same time that colleagues are entitled to. I want to ask a question just for clarity on the others. Would it be fair to say that the capacity of an exit system is limited by its most restrictive element?
Yes, that's what the guide states.
Does the guide also say it makes no difference to the efficiency of the system where the most restrictive element is located?
Yes.
That the capacity is always determined by it?
Yes.
I mean, this is the issue about whether you look at exit widths or reservoir areas. Can I just make it clear that there is no ambiguity? It is quite clear in the guides about what's written down. A decal document and then a UK guided. It is not ambiguous, it is clear. Can I ask you about the issue of emergency exiting schemes? Was that a matter of concern for the STG during the year 2013?
Yes.
Was it a matter of... Was it a trivial concern? Was it just a concern? Was it just one of many? Or was it a significant concern?
The Chair, it's leading the witness.
I'm not. These are open questions. These are open questions. I'm just asking, was it a concern? Could you... So it was a significant concern. Could you tell me, in relation to the previous Permanent Secretary, Rosie Flanagan's statement, what she means by when she says, importantly, that the overall physical design is capable of achieving full spectator capacity within future venue certification. What does that actually mean?
Well, I had assumed that it meant, and my interpretation of what it meant was that it was important, given the regional stadium programme, that it was important to try and achieve designs that would, to have designs or grounds designed that would achieve maximum capacity.
So this is my last thread on this, because some members have made considerable store by the fact that people have mentioned the word Hillsborough, and that this could never have happened because there would have been certification issues that would come along. But would I be correct in assuming that if a physical build passed through planning for 38,000 or 34,000 for that matter, but that if the emergency exiting scheme could not be satisfactorily resolved, that the certification might have resulted in a lower capacity for the stadium?
Yes.
So the risk here is one of the risk to public finance, that you might build a stadium for 38,000 and end up only being able to put circa 18,000 into it.
Which is why it was so important that the design was all considered as we went along and looked at, and if there were any issues that needed to be resolved, that they could be resolved.
And you are clear that that was information that would have been available to DCAL, that DCAL would have been aware of that potential problem if the emergency exiting scheme was not satisfactorily addressed?
Yes, it was in the report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman McMullen.
Just on that quickly, just what Basil's after saying there, that you could have a building design or building that wouldn't be able to, or it could be too big for the exiting plan that you have in it. When was the certificate given to Ravenhill?
It was issued to Ravenhill in April. It was at the.
And also to the other.
It was for the new development. It was issued on the 5th. The final safety certificate was issued on the 5th of April 2014.
When was that, before the opening?
Just before the opening.
So it was built and all before the certificate was given.
Oh yes.
So thank you on that.
Have to be finalised.
Yes, of course. But then the building was built before the certificate was given out.
Oh, you couldn't issue
that way legally.
Yeah.
Then could you build something that wouldn't be compatible with your emergency exit? And then is what Mr. McRae is after stating.
The certificate will be used to determine what the safe exiting exiting on the brain, what the safe capacity of the ground will be, and it will be so. You can have a much greater holding capacity in a ground, but the safe capacity of that ground under the certificate could be much lower, because it could be limited by entrancing, it could be limited by exiting, or it could be limited by emergency exiting.
All those things would be done through the design process.
Well,
in consultation with yourselves.
Well, that is I thought was the role of the STG.
Yeah. So then it would be really, in a sense, nearly impossible to have a building there with a lower capacity than what you would build it for.
Legally, we would issue the safety certificate for the safe capacity of the ground.
Right, and just my last question, Bonnie, and thanks for your patience. The holding capacity, and come back to this very quickly, the holding capacity for the emergency exiting, and when you read out what's in the Green Book, there's no way around that, none at all.
I mean, in terms of the pitch not being used as part of the calculation?
Yes. No. Just down to capacity, or what's it down to?
You cannot use the pitch when you're calculating your emergency exiting capacity.
Yes. Yep. So, what numbers? Where do you get the numbers to calculate that on? That's an ongoing process as well.
That's where we're asking for the additional information.
Yes.
So that we can look at that.
So, we haven't got to that stage yet. It's still an ongoing process of design.
It is, yes.
There's no red flags anywhere.
I don't understand what you mean by that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. William Humphrey.
Yeah, Chair, it was very clear last week, at this point area, GA said they have no designs. Can I just say, we have invited Ryan and Mr. Walsh here because of the expertise and the experience that Belfast City Council provides. And Ms Brown has quoted facts from guidelines. Belfast City Council's record in terms of health and safety, whether in sports grounds or indeed anything else. They have a huge event on this weekend, is absolutely exemplary. And members are absolutely, and parties are absolutely at will to make their own judgments and take positions based on evidence that is provided. But to the best of my knowledge, having listened to Valerie's presentation today and the evidence given, it is factually based and it is the case. So it's not an order for members to say, I'm not sure if we'll get to the bottom of this, because what is being presented is factual, based on guidelines that are produced by the department which we scrutinise and by the Green Guide which governs stadia across the United Kingdom.
Thank you indeed. Could I thank both Valerie and John for their evidence, and you were with us for well over 2 hours there. I think you've actually been very helpful. Just, William, just for a second before you go there.
We're still live.
We're still, yeah. Thank you. The one thing that struck me there very much was we had a witness before us last week in Noel Malloy, who was the Stadium Programme Director. And that's a very influential and important position in the architecture of the process. And several times the question was put as to who was responsible for developing an emergency exiting plan that was satisfactory. He kept going back to the Blue Light Emergency Services.
He did.
And that was a thing that we went over on several occasions, and we'll get the Hansard of that in the next number of days, and we'll be able to check that thoroughly. But that is totally at odds with what was read to us today. And I think there are questions emerging in this about the knowledge and expertise that has been presented to this committee. Because someone comes along who'd been in a very senior position and says it was certain people responsible for a key issue, and then we're told, well, actually, no, it's not. That raises questions about the whole process. And I think it's important over the summer that we have that opportunity to weigh up all of the evidence that we've been given and compare and contrast also with the two guides, the red and the green guide. We're going to take a 20-minute break and then we'll reconvene.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.